to stick with this like transhumanist sort of thing, another thread that you're keeping in the mix of your coverage is the internet of Bio-Nano-Things and smart dust, which they openly say is designed to blanket major cities so they can have, quote, intelligence at every square inch. And a lot of this does seem too sci-fi. I know the tech is there, but is it really being implemented anywhere at that sort of citywide scale?
Well, this is the question, right? This is the question. And what's that?
Yeah, maybe we just don't know.
Exactly. And this is my point is always is that, I'm trying to trigger questions in people's minds to not just, say what I'm saying or what you're saying, but, to actually be able to think about this and reflect on this and come to their own conclusions about it. And I think the information is very clear. I mean, I go back to like decades ago to a group called, I think it's called Smart Networks, if I remember correctly, or is it Dust Networks? I've looked back at it, but the point is it's a company that was on the record before anybody was even talking about this, discussing the idea of using this like in real world tests, tracking cargo and all this stuff. And the video of on this group, which by the way, I have on the way back machine because you can't even find it anymore. He's got this video where he's literally got like what looks like sand. And it's like a mock video where he's giving you a demonstration where he's throwing sand in the air. And like, this is what he's talking about. And they're literally telling you we're using smart dust to track cargo. So you explain for me how that was ever possible. Not, and this wasn't hypothetical. This was telling you they were already doing these things. How is that possible without some already being deployed? Right now, I don't know what that means. If that is something that, the question is that something that happens, then just kind of dissipates or goes away? Does it, what's the word I was looking for? Does it self-replicate? I don't know. What level are we at this point? And that's the concern. So my point is to first make sure people know it's not fake. It's a real story. I have a clip that I play regularly from like a symposium about nanotechnology where it shows the DARPA chip and it shows the Mu chip. This is something that was usable in real time 20 years ago, literally like 19 and a half years ago to be, I think, pretty exact. Was something that they were already doing. And this was a chip that was, the image they show is that they show a salt crystal, one piece of salt. And this thing is like a 20th the size of a piece of salt. And this was 20 years ago. So imagine what's happening now. And he says he talks about it. The smart dust. You can literally throw it into the air currents, breathe it in, goes into your body, lands on your skin. It uses your own body's energy, your own body's motion. It can two-way relay information. I mean, this is 20 years ago. I mean, this is real stuff. This is what DARPA has been working on. They're at the level of things like hydrogels and like they're way past this now. My concern is like, okay, well, if we know that, and at the time I was discussing dust networks or smart networks, I've got to remember which one it was. They were discussing about this being the future. Like this is the connective point, as you just said, actually, to smart networks, to smart cities, right? To meshing and all the stuff they're telling you. And then yet this just vanishes from the conversation. Where did this go? They're telling you this is right now they're telling you the idea of nanotechnology. So clearly smart dust is a part of this, but I find it very ominous that we just it's just not part of the conversation. So bringing this into the conversation of nanotechnology and stuff and the injections and all these other things, I really truly believe that this is something that's already been used. I don't know to what degree. I just had a great interview with Dane Wigington about geoengineering and the possible overlap about that exact point, about how it could be sprayed and released. And, I just don't know why this stuff gets so reflexively dismissed when it's a very real topic. They put billions of dollars into researching and quite frankly, I think is already deployed if I had to give you my opinion on it, and what that really means. I mean, God only knows at this point.
Yes, I was going to bring up that interview with Dane and just the whole idea of they talk about this stuff and then suddenly they don't. That was a big eye opener for me with Matt Landman's documentary Frankenskies about the chemtrails and the cloud seeding and geoengineering, because he plays clip after clip throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s where military generals are bragging about what they're able to do. Suddenly people start seeing chemtrails and wondering what that is, and we're just all crazy. What do you mean? We don't have that technology. You've only been talking about it for like 3 decades. The patents are filed. He pulls them up in the documentary. So we just think you have all this technology and you're not using it? Yeah, I would think you're probably using it. And that
Provably.
Dan Wigington interview, you have in the title, Geoengineering, Nanotech, and Biocarrier Platforms for Pathogen Dispersion. What about that last part? Biocarrier platforms for pathogen dispersion. Do you think that's been in use?
Well, I mean, it's all the same conversation, right? I mean, you can go back to someone like Charles Lieber, who is still the leading person in the world on nanotechnology, who was weirdly arrested in the beginning of 2020, or in the beginning of the COVID-19 conversation, for working with China, right? And he got caught with people with him got caught with biomaterial in their sock from Beth Israel Hospital to bring into China, right? And so the interesting point there is that he has this obvious overlap with whatever happened in this big story. And so that's my point. He worked on something in 2011. He said he successfully created what he called a virus-sized transistor. Think how small that is. And again, there's people that would argue that that's not true, that they didn't actually do it. It's more hype. But my point is that I think we can prove the nanotech side of it. So if they're arguing to the level, at least if they say they're aiming towards, is a virus-sized transistor that he makes a point to say is, and this was on Harvard's website right now, it makes a point to say that when you get to the level of a virus or this level of nanotechnology, that biology and technology kind of blur the lines between it. So my point I keep making is, how do we know that isn't literally what we're dealing with today? Some virus-sized thing they put out in the world that they lost control of. I don't know if that's even what I believe, but it's just all these different things are possible, you know? And so it's like that is something that is very real. And the point you're making, your question about the biocarriers, this is where we get to the conversation of what Klaus Schwab and many of these others have told you about, is what we're all supposed to be doing, right? The bio-digital convergence, right? This time in the world, the fourth industrial revolution, where we're all supposed to be blending our biology with technology. That's what he's saying we're in right now. So when you start to think of it in those terms, and you go back to 2011 and Lieber saying that when you get to that level, it all blurs together anyway. It's like, okay, so what are we actually talking about? Are these nanotechnology aspects? Are we getting into the actual bio-digital convergence where there's I mean, quite literally, this is what we're dealing with in these shots. We're kind of overlapping technology with biology in a very alarming way with gene technology and gene editing. So my point, I guess, would be that if you're dispersing some like smart dust concept, that very well could be something that is carrying some biological protein concept, like we talked about the spike protein that can be dispersed, like geoengineering. It's all hypothesis. I'm not saying that this is happening, but I think that it's very possible. And if it's possible, I think historically we've come to find out that they've already done it 45 times. That's how this usually goes, you know? So all I've ever asked with this coverage is just I want people to understand that we're already here. And while we're like literally at the human species level of pointing at like video cameras and robots, that we're fucking like so far past that we can't even grasp, you know, like that's what I worry about, that we're looking down while we should be looking up, or whatever the analogy should be, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What do you think about the end goals or the motivation for that sort of transhumanist stuff? Obviously, control and data harvesting would be big. I think that angle that they're going to test a bunch of stuff on us to see if they can find the right tools and combination of tools for their own longevity is probably in the mix. But do you think there's something more? Because this just seems like so lofty and they're applying so much energy to it. And I can't imagine it wouldn't ultimately fail. It seems like the implementation is a lot more complicated than they're making it seem in these presentations. But do you think there's like some deeper unspoken motivation to force this stuff down our throats?
I mean, quite frankly, it could be as simple as just experimentation. I mean, I don't think we truly need to look for a bigger intent with the way that our history has already gone. I mean, literally just looking at the US government, but from a worldwide perspective, that people in power have used their, you know, the peons for whatever they want, as they see it anyway, you know, right? Historically, our government's tested on us provably. I think the number was like 237, 37, over 200 times, provably, where they've admitted to testing biological or chemical things on unwitting populations. Operation Sea Spray is a public, very prominent example, right? Where they were later admitted they used a biological agent over San Francisco. It killed a couple of people, and they swore we were just trying to figure out how susceptible we were. It's like, I don't care what your reasoning is. You did this and you killed people without even caring to tell them what was happening, you know? And so to intent, you know, I think there's a lot of things you could look at, right? Like whether you're trying to, people would argue depopulation, you know, there's all these different arguments you could look at. The one that stands out to me is the experimental side of this, right? That they're trying to achieve something. Whitney Webb's great work does a lot of overlap with this in regard to like the AI aspect of it, trying to map the human brain was something that we talked about early on, like literally, hypothetically, if there was something put in people's bodies to like mesh their like this. Oh, this is, you brought up the Internet of Bio-Nano-Things. That's what that actually talks about, right? If you all end up having nanotechnology in your body, and this is actually what this means. Like this is that you would have nanotech or smart dust in your body, and that would be connected with the internet. And then your bodies become like these body networks that you can mesh with other people's bodies. There's patents for this stuff, right? So it's not hypothetical, right? So it's real that they've already, tested technologically. So my worry in regard to that is about what they're trying to accomplish beyond just experimentation, because that alone could be something they're trying to achieve to, better the human race, which I don't believe that's the intent, but people would buy that. But there's work that I've shown, and this is where it gets really weird and ties back in with the injection in regard to Robert Langer and even Charles Lieber again. Their work has intersected many times in regard to biosurveillance using nanotechnology specifically. And this is actually where the virus-sized transistor, going back to 2011, comes into play, because it's a two-way communication. It's the idea. And even then, guess what actually made that successful? The lipid nanoparticle. The lipid covering on this is what got them to insert this into the cell that made it successful. So that was an overlap of his work, Robert Langer's work. They overlap. The point is, he is the co-founder of Moderna, Robert Langer. And so this work goes back long before COVID-19, has continued ever since. And it goes into some really alarming aspects of using nanotechnology, using either natural or actually engineered proteins to be able to influence every aspect of the body. And it goes into things like being able to influence the way you feel, or changing things in the body to create certain processes, like, to where you can suddenly think you need to eat or think you don't need to. Right. And it goes extreme. You could argue or you prove in their own studies, they did something with diabetics, insulin. And so the point is, you could easily make this kill somebody. You could easily deploy this to shut down their insulin and destroy their body, or any number of other things they could do. It's everything you could imagine. And this is discussed going back 2015, 16. The Guardian did an article about this, but it goes further than that. Right. There's a whole conversation that the Guardian named, or they named, what Guardian discussed as the magnetoprotein. It's called ferritin. We have it in our body. It's a protein that has a lot of iron particles in it. So they've discovered there's a way to manipulate these proteins to be able to influence the outcome of not just your thoughts, your feelings, but your actual motion. And this was proven in 2016. The Rockefeller Institute did a study using mice, and they literally moved these mice. They were able to influence not just the way they felt to drive what they did, but literally manipulate their motions, their bodies, their arms, and even goes to the point of arguing, if they have things in the right place, that they could relay that information. That's the whole point, the biosurveillance, about having this info, whether it's your heart rate, your biometrics, your everything, relayed back, but also that they proved that if the eye, the ocular aspect of it, the retina, they could relay that information. So you're literally talking about being able to relay what you're looking at, because you have nanotechnology in your body, utilizing ferritin nanoparticles that they've either created or manipulated. And this gets... it goes everywhere, literally in every possible direction. That's why I titled that article about manufacturing proteins to control everything. Like, literally go to the point to where you could control anything using this manufacturing process, overlapping that with the platform system they're building. And, again, just so it's clear, everything I just said is provable. Whether it's happening, that's debatable. But history is there. I argue this stuff has already been tested. And I think that's largely what COVID-19 was.
And that's largely what COVID-19 was.
I really do believe that. I mean, it's my opinion completely, but
sure,
there's so many aspects of it that show that this was a massive experiment. I think we all kind of agree on that, but that point to me stands out more than anything. And it's one of the least discussed, I would argue.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higherside Chat Show.